Hello, it's Jennifer Savary, and today's video is of a card that I made last year and said that I would put up a video. St. Patrick's Day came and went and the video never got done. So this past week a subscriber specifically asked for this card, and I love getting special requests, so thank you for that, and here is the tutorial. I have to say, you guys, I am completely blown away by the wonderful comments and the new subscriptions, and I'm absolutely speechless. So thank you for supporting my channel. Thank you. Along with this, I also created the video for the scratch off card, and so that's uploaded as well. I couldn't fit it into this video, so it's a separate video. I started off by using the classic uppercase alphabet by Memory Box, and I was going to do 3 layers of the letters, but I didn't want too much dimension, so I just did 2. I'm using a kind of a tan colored paper and going over it with vintage photo. Now, I did go in after this and did some walnut stain to darken it up even more. The castle die is called the Enchanted Castle by Tattered Lace, and I'm actually going to be cutting it apart to make it fit on this card. I went over it with vintage photo and a little bit of walnut stain, and then I needed to cut out just that center portion, so I cut the door apart. The overall card dimensions are standard 4.25 by 5.5, and this little decorated panel is going to sit 1/8 of an inch in all the way around. This makes the base width 4 inches wide, and I needed 3 equal panels, so I had to do the math, and each panel needed to be 1.33 inches. Now, you've heard me say before, I really do not like measuring, but I did need to be precise here. So you'll see if you watch the bottom there, I split it up into 16ths because imperfections are less noticeable at 1/16 of an inch, and I counted 5.3 16ths. This worked pretty well, and I had about 1/16 of an inch white space at the end, which I was really happy with, that it wasn't more, and so I just used my trimmer to cut that off, and that trimmer with a sharp blade will cut those little tiny strips. And then I just cut it down to be 4 by 5.25 inches. I went around the edge with a little bit of the vintage photo, and it didn't take much because this is going to be on a white background, so it really stands out when placed on that. The castle was too big for the card, so I did need to cut it down. And I didn't need to be too precise here, but if I wanted it to be the same, I just lined it up on the grid and then cut it that way. The little beers are going to hide most of this, so I wasn't really too concerned about the bottoms being shown there. But that's how I was going to plan on lining everything up. Okay, so to create a mirror image of the beer, I did this exactly how a video by Jennifer McGuire laid it all out, and I'll put a link to that video down below. But I just needed a solid stamp, and so I chose the Moon by Altenew. I wanted to show the other stamps that I thought would work too, and any background stamp with a solid base to work from I think would work, like a jar or the postcard or even the background strips there. My moon does now have a beer on it, but it doesn't bother me and it doesn't affect the stamping, so that's okay. I put the acetate down into the MISTI, and then I put the stamp face up on that acetate. The moon was then placed onto the MISTI, and the beer was stamped with Memento ink. I did this twice, and the first time with very light pressure so that the stamp did not come up off that acetate. The second time I did apply a little bit more pressure because I didn't really care if the stamp came up with it. It didn't in this case. I was just really slowly lifting it up. And then I quickly removed the stamp, put the foam backing back in, and immediately put in the paper that I was stamping onto. I'm using Bristol watercolor paper because originally I was going to watercolor with Inktense pencils, but the Memento ink does bleed pretty bad with the watercolor. I think, like Jennifer McGuire said, VersaFine ink would be the best choice here. I didn't have any, so I just used what I had and adjusted the coloring. So I used the colored pencils, and I'm just using some different colors here I'll list. And I wasn't too particular, just kind of wanted to create that beer look there. I could have gone with green beers here too. I think that would have looked cute, but I stuck with the traditional. And that wooden colored pencil is actually a blender, and I love how going over that creates just a really nice blend with those pencil strokes. So I went in with some Snow-Tex, and yes, I do use my X-Acto knife to do this. Probably not the best choice, but that's what I've always used. I like that sharp point, and I was just kind of guiding that down to create kind of a foamy look. I let it dry for about an hour, and then it was time to cut out the little beers. And the scissors go right in underneath that Snow-Tex, and so none of the lines show through. You don't see a border of paper above the Snow-Tex. It just works perfectly. So, and I did cut the little sharp points of the bottom of the beer into just tiny little curves so that it didn't look quite so cut out. And then I used my X-Acto knife for the inside of the handle and went over the edges with some vintage photo, which just really, took that edge off. Now I did go in with a water brush and a tiny bit of scattered straw distress ink, just to very, very lightly add a little bit of color to the foam. Once the color was added, I went in again with just no color and just some clear water to blend it. Less is more here with the water, but it did work just perfectly. So then I just started gluing the castle together, and I just lined up the center one, and then notice how I'm not gluing down the bottom portion. That's going to be hidden in underneath. It's not going anywhere, but I need to be able to cut the corner that's showing, and so I wanted to make sure to leave that unglued. I put a little foam square behind each beer so that they would be dimensionalized on the front of the card. And it was after the beers were placed that I could look at those little corners of the castle and see where I needed to trim those off. They would have probably been fine just how they were, but I just didn't want any random corners hanging out, so I trimmed them. I used 2 of the letters as a guide for the vertical spacing. And see how I line up my ruler on the left edge there? If that's straight, the line is usually straight. For the bottom line, there wasn't quite enough space for my ruler, and so I used the grid to my craft mat to make sure that was nice and straight. I put all the letters down before gluing them, just so that I knew that I was gluing them kind of in the right place, and I worked backwards. And everything lined up pretty well on that line. I just needed to erase just a few little parts of it, but it was a very faint line and it really wasn't shown. So then I just attached it to the card base, and the card was done. I mentioned this in my first St. Patrick's Day video, but Erin Go Bragh means Ireland forever. And I actually gave this card to a friend who is Irish, and he really liked it and thought it was just a lot of fun. I brought these little St. Patrick's Day treat holders to work to give to coworkers last year, and they liked that. And then this Lucky to Know You scratch off is also uploaded today. And I call this my little leprechaun's castle. It's a tag that I put in with a shamrock plant gift. And if that's something you would like to see, leave a note in the comments and I'll make a video for that as well. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you again soon.